Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight's meeting. My name is Chris Pfeiffer, and we have Carrie Rappold here who's going to do an introduction and a welcome.
Thanks, Chris. So yeah, my name's Carrie Rappold. I'm the city's natural resources manager and also the project manager for the urban forest management plan. And so this is our first opportunity to do a meeting with the community, our first open house. And of course, due to COVID, we're doing it online. So I appreciate you checking in that way. Certainly the city has really valued over the years the protection and conservation of the trees and the urban forest in the community. And this plan really represents a great opportunity for us to think long-term in terms of how we're going to manage this forest and what do we want to see 25 years in the future. And so that's the time frame that we're looking at. We're certainly going to be looking at strategies and other means to achieve that. And Chris is going to walk us through that tonight and give us an introduction to what we intend to do with the plan. So thank you again.
All right. Thank you, Carrie, and thank you to everyone for taking the time to listen into the live meeting and for folks that are going to be joining the recording. Before we begin, I'd like to start off with a quote from a model of urban forest sustainability. And this quote is from James Clark and his colleagues, which states, "Urban trees and forests are considered integral to the sustainability of cities as a whole. Yet sustainable urban forests are not born, they are made. They do not arise at random, but result from a community-wide commitment to their creation and management." So this quote is a great reminder that community education and engagement is vital to urban forestry planning, and it describes the purpose of us gathering this evening. So I want to thank everyone again for taking the time to join us and look forward to the discussions that we'll have throughout the presentation. Throughout the presentation, you're welcome to use the chat box for any comments or questions. And then we'll have a period at the end of the presentation for back and forth dialogue and discussion. And I'll address any questions that weren't taken care of in the chat box by Carrie throughout the presentation. So again, welcome, and keep in mind this presentation is recorded. So we'll be sharing the recording along with the PDF of this presentation for any follow-up or questions and to learn more. As Carrie said, my name is Chris Pfeiffer, and I work for Planet Geo as the Director of Urban Forestry Consulting Services, and I'm the project manager for this Urban Forest Management Plan project. And also assisting with the development of the project from Planet Geo's side is Megan Blansett, a GIS and natural resources specialist, as well as Andrew Carrier, an urban forestry planning support staff member. So I'd like to thank them for also working behind the scenes in preparing a lot of what we're going to present today, and a lot of the initial results and findings as we go through the planning processes. Before we get into the meeting though, since this is a virtual meeting, we'd like to just have some interaction, and keep in mind the second meeting will be more interactive. But at this point, if you feel inclined, feel free to share your name, perhaps your neighborhood, favorite tree, or favorite park to visit, and really just a sense of what brought you here tonight for this meeting. And so the chat box is there for folks to enter anything that they'd like relating to this meeting. And it'll be useful for our records as we go forward with the planning for the urban forest, and also great to get to know one another throughout these meetings. And you'll see that this is the first of 3 meetings in the planning process. So hopefully folks that are on this call, on this meeting, will join us throughout the entire process, and we'll gain some traction and have more attendees as we progress with the project. So feel free to share, the meeting recording, the presentation with folks that would like to attend but weren't able to make it this evening. All right, so the chat box is there for folks to add in information, what brought them here tonight, and also for any comments or questions that we'll address later on in the presentation. So this presentation is going to discuss and set the stage by describing the extent of the urban forest and what will be covered in the urban forest plan. We'll also describe the benefits of trees and the urban forest and why a plan is important. We'll then describe key issues and opportunities as it relates to programs, plans, policies, the city's urban forest today, and the urban forest of tomorrow. The Urban Forest Management Plan, or sometimes referred to as UFMP, or the plan, will have a framework that describes the project's scope of work and approach to address key issues and opportunities. So this presentation will lay out the framework on how we address those key issues and opportunities discussed tonight. And then we'll wrap up the presentation with closing remarks, reminders of opportunities to get involved and ways to communicate and provide input, and then open it up to questions and comments from the chat box. And before we get started, I would like to set the stage and describe the different types of landscapes that comprise the urban forest and what the plan will address. So when we talk about urban forest, we talk about city trees across the city, both on public and private property. So looking at trees across the landscape. We also look at trees in open space and natural areas, and trees along riparian zones, such as the Willamette River Water Treatment Plant Park there that you see in the top right. We also look at trees on academic grounds and school properties, as well as trees in parks, as you see in the center image with the Wilsonville Memorial Park. We also look at trees in front and backyards of residential properties, trees on commercial and industrial land, as well as trees in the downtown and shopping districts, as well as planned neighborhoods. Throughout this process and describing this landscape, we want to keep in mind and emphasize that trees are an important part of a community's infrastructure, and they're a valuable asset that should be managed, just as sidewalks, roadways, and utilities are managed. Urban trees need to be planned and properly managed and cared for. So this presentation, as well as the Urban Forest Management Plan, will treat trees and the urban forest as such. And it's important to consider trees as a valuable asset to the community because of the different variety of benefits that trees and the entire urban forest provide to the community. So these trees across the landscapes that were described provide benefits to the community in terms of reducing stormwater and improving water quality. Trees provide shade over sidewalk and parking lots to reduce urban heat islands and also save energy. And trees increase property values and improve human health and well-being, among many other environmental, economic, and social benefits. Not only are these benefits seen and felt, they can be measured and quantified. The value of individual trees and the entire urban forest can be calculated in terms of increased property values, human health impacts of improving air quality, the savings acquired from reducing stormwater that would otherwise be managed by a treatment facility, and the reduced energy use as a result of trees providing shade over residential and commercial properties. An example of this was applied to a subset of Wilsonville's tree population. So recently, an inventory of 2,356 trees was completed, and the ecosystem benefits that were previously described were calculated. And we used what's known as iTree, which is a US Forest Service and partner suite of tools where you can calculate these ecosystem benefits. We also used the tree inventory software program to quantify the value of these nearly 2,400 trees that were recently inventoried. So when you look at the ecosystem benefits, as previously described, stormwater, energy savings, air quality, we find that these 2,400 trees alone provide nearly $280,000 in annual benefits. Of these $280,000 in benefits, the calculations determined that nearly $48,000 of benefits are derived from stormwater management. So this is stormwater that doesn't need to be treated by a facility because the tree canopy is capturing the precipitation, preventing that runoff and that flow or volume of water. It's estimated that these 2,400 trees prevent nearly 4.4 million gallons of stormwater runoff per year. So what does that look like? It's estimated that that's nearly 7 Olympic-sized swimming pools that trees reduce in terms of volume of stormwater. In addition, the 2,400 trees sequester the carbon dioxide emitted from nearly 175 vehicles per year. Now, this is assuming a vehicle averages 22 miles per gallon and 11,500 miles per year. But when you do the math, it equates to approximately 175 vehicles of carbon dioxide sequestered by just these 2,400 trees. And then when we also look at energy savings, it was found that the 2,400 trees save energy equivalent to 64 family households annually. And that's estimating 4,500 kilowatt hour per year per household. So imagine what the entire public tree population provides, or even the entire urban forest across public and private boundaries. Fortunately, the Urban Forest Management Plan will provide these estimates so that the city and partners can encourage urban forest stewardship. So these are exciting numbers just for a subset of the population in terms of ecosystem benefits and values. And we look forward to analyzing the nearly 24,000 inventoried public trees. And we know that there are even more than 24,000 public trees when looking at trees in maintained and unmaintained areas of parks and open space. So these numbers will really be astounding when we start to look at the entire urban forest. And throughout this process, the planning process, providing recommendations in the management plan, we want to look at trees and the quality of trees that are in Wilsonville. So this slide illustrates the message that larger, long-lasting trees provide significantly more benefits and value. As trees increase in age and size, the value increases. But we also want to consider looking at the appropriate tree species and addressing invasive species, because those ecosystem benefits that were described in previous slides are enhanced when you have appropriate species compared to invasives. So the management plan is going to emphasize the importance of planting large trees where it's feasible and with enough soil volume and space, among other considerations such as irrigation, species, the function for the given site, and the maintenance regimen. And as we progress in the presentation, this is just a time to remind folks to use the chat box and also to enjoy the scenery here shown in Sophia Park in Wilsonville. And this transition slide leads us into the section of key issues and opportunities. So now that we've set the stage by providing the extent of the urban forest and the benefits of trees, I'll discuss the key issues and opportunities as it relates to Wilsonville's urban forest. So within this section, we'll describe the existing programs, plans, and policies relating to trees, as well as descriptions of the city's urban forest today and the urban forest of tomorrow. Much of the urban forestry program is coordinated by the Natural Resources Program within the Community Development Department and is supported by other departments and partners. There are a variety of programs managed or supported by the Natural Resources Program. For example, the Bee Stewards Program includes programs to create pollinator habitats, implement an integrated pest management plan, and provide education to the public. Other programs centered around hardy plants includes programs such as the Backyard Habitat Certification Program, which is coordinated by the Audubon Society of Portland and the Columbia Land Trust organizations and supported by the Natural Resource Program. The Natural Resource Program also oversees or supports low-impact development projects, also known as LID projects, and implements the stormwater management and master plans for the city. The program also supports partnerships with organizations such as CREST, which is the Center for Research in Environmental Sciences and Technology within the Westland Wilsonville School District. And the natural resources projects may include low-impact development projects, invasive plant management, trail restorations such as the Willamette River Water Trail, and habitat and stream restoration. And as you can see, new programs continue to be developed, such as the Integrated Pest Management Program. And this may apply to open space, natural areas, and our urban forest for trees along streets and medians. So now we'll talk a little bit more about the programs beyond just what was described for the Natural Resource Program. These additional urban forestry related programs include the Heritage Tree Program, which identifies trees classified as unique or significant by a volunteer citizen community. So you can check out these heritage trees by taking a virtual tour. Either copy the link that's on the screen here or search for Wilsonville's heritage trees, and you can explore the significant trees across the city. The city is also achieving national recognition for its urban forestry program by being awarded as a Tree City USA for 22 years by the Arbor Day Foundation. In addition, the city has received the prestigious Sterling Tree City USA Award for having received 10 growth awards from the Arbor Day Foundation. And the Tree City USA program looks at the budget for urban forest management. It looks at having a tree committee and having an ordinance relating to urban tree preservation and the care for urban trees in cities. The city is also utilizing innovative software to manage its public tree population through their Tree Plotter platform, or they're beginning to see its use and function. The software app will allow the city to prioritize maintenance and strategically plan new tree plantings among many other daily operations. So as we provide recommendations in the management plan and as inventory data is updated, the tools and the data will be available for effective implementation, prioritization for tree plantings, and also for tree maintenance. And that's really important when we look at the care and growth of the urban forest. Trees are also integrated into the stormwater management program, and the city has a close partnership with Friends of Trees, which is a nonprofit organization that organizes volunteers for tree planting and tree care projects along city streets, in urban natural areas, and on school grounds. Other programs and partners include the CREST organization, or the Center for Research in Environmental Sciences and Technology, as well as the Student Watershed Research Project, which is out of Wilsonville High School. And it's a student club conducting field research, water quality monitoring, and community environmental service for over 12 years. So there are these programs, among many others, that are supporting urban forestry efforts. And as we begin to develop the urban forest management plan, we want to keep these partners and also these programs in mind, and also identify ways to strengthen and establish new programs going forward. It is also important to evaluate existing city and partner plans to gauge the city's readiness for improved levels of urban forest management that are provided in an urban forestry plan. The UFMP must also recognize existing goals and actions, and plans should complement and support one another. So as we develop an urban forestry plan, we want to be keeping in mind other plans and efforts going on throughout the city, supported by the city and supported by partners. Some of these existing plans include the Comprehensive Plan, which was developed in 2000 and just recently updated in June of this year. There's also the Wilsonville Urban Renewal Strategic Plan, which was developed in 2014, and that led to the development of the Coffee Creek Master Plan in 2016, among other sub-area plans. There are also other plans for the city, such as planned neighborhood master plans. One example is the Town Center Plan of 2019. And that Town Center Plan states that it puts people first with walkable streetscapes and places to gather, shop, work, eat, and recreate. Another example of a plan that's going to be integrated with the urban forestry plan is the Stormwater Master Plan of 2012. And this plan supports low-impact development and the use of trees to reduce stormwater and improve water quality. And there's also many other plans that are shown in screenshots or that haven't been mentioned in this slide. And so as we develop the management plan, we want to recognize the goals and actions in these plans and also see how these plans can support one another. So in the section of key issues and opportunities, we look at existing programs, existing plans, and now we're taking a look at existing policies around urban trees. So a strong foundation of policies are required for a successful urban forestry program. And the city currently has urban forestry related policies under section 4.600 of City Code's Development Code section. And this section provides the guidelines for tree protection, maintenance, removals, and planting. So throughout the planning process, we're going to be evaluating these policies and codes and ordinances to see areas for improvement, align inconsistencies, update information with industry standards, and take into consideration the input from city staff, benchmarking research by looking at comparable cities, and also using industry standards and community feedback and input. And so just to describe briefly what City Code currently provides in terms of tree preservation and protection, there's a section under 4.600 that provides a statement of purpose. And this is to protect the tree assets as the city continues to grow and change. This section also includes a description of permits for various types of tree removal. It may be for permit type A, B, C, or D. And as we get into more of the project and future community meetings, we may be discussing these and other ordinances and policies in more detail. And these can be found on the city's website as well if you're interested in learning more. This section also includes standards to describe the requirements for tree removal, relocation, or replacement. And a section on replacements discusses the guidelines for the trees that are removed and ANSI tree nursery standards that are that should be considered or required, as well as the appropriate species and the location for trees during replacements. This section also talks about protection and provides guidelines for tree protection during construction and the use of industry standards for maintenance, such as the ANSI A300 standards. And then in the realm of urban forestry, it's really important to look at proper tree maintenance and to cite and utilize industry standards, such as the ANSI A300 standards. Lastly, there's a section on enforcement, which deals with violations of city code and ensuring that proper procedures are in place for the benefit of preserving trees appropriately, while also being considerate of development and development needs. And just a quick slide to state that there are additional city code sections that address either street trees or the natural environment. And we can take a look at 4.113, where we have standards applying to residential developments in any zone. And then another section of significant resource overlay zone, which regulates uses and activities that could impact locally significant wetlands, riparian corridors, and upland wildlife habitat. So if you recall, when we were setting the stage by describing the urban forestry extent, we not only talk about street trees and public trees in parks, but we look at the urban forest as a whole and an ecosystem. So that includes these other areas and these landscapes, such as the wetlands and riparian corridors. Lastly, for this section, to describe the policies relating to the key issues and opportunities are the manuals and standards. And these manuals are developed to support city code. And some examples of these manuals and standards are presented on this slide. Throughout the planning process, which we'll describe in this presentation, we'll be taking a look at these existing manuals, standards, standard operating procedures, protocols, to make sure that the recommendations that we provide in a plan are supported with efficient workflows and operations for the city. And then we also want to see that the latest in urban forestry research and industry standards are utilized in these manuals and standards when feasible. Okay, on to the next section within key issues and opportunities. And this is where we look at Wilsonville's urban forest today. As I mentioned earlier, it's estimated that there are more than 24,000 public street trees. And currently, to date, 24,000 of these public street trees are inventoried. And as I mentioned earlier, a few months ago in 2020, an inventory was conducted in Town Center, as well as along Southwest French Prairie Road. And a total of 2,356 trees were inventoried during that effort. And this helps us to develop recommendations and outreach efforts for these areas specifically. And also, as you saw earlier in the slides, get an idea of the ecosystem benefits provided by a subset of the population. And that'll help to encourage additional studies and inform the public about the benefits of trees going forward. The city also consists of 15 public parks, and within those 1,500 parks, 15 public parks, there's 1,500 acres of parkland, and that's based on the 2016 Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which provides the estimated number of acres within these 15 parks. With this section, we also want to look at the urban forest of tomorrow. An urban forest management plan is a vital planning document to shape and manage the urban forest of tomorrow. So this plan will address issues and concerns such as population growth. As population continues to expand, the space for new plantings is reduced and existing trees may sometimes be removed. Tree pests and diseases are a concern and will be addressed in the management plan because there are native and exotic tree pests and diseases that continue to threaten urban and rural trees, and future unknown pests are always a concern. Invasive plant species compete with beneficial vegetation and provide less ecosystem benefits. So addressing these invasives along streetscapes and in open space is an important part of having a healthy urban forest. Not just canopy, but healthy, good canopy. And as you recall, large trees that provide long-lasting benefits. And the needs of the city must be addressed and address things such as the management of stormwater and address climate resiliency. The plan will provide recommendations and adaptive management measures to enhance the level of service and available resources for urban forest management. Storms and disasters require proper procedures to prepare, to manage, and to recover from, and the management plan will look at the resources and approaches for storm and risk management. The urban forest policy must be reviewed and updated to support goals of the urban forest management plan and the community. So this plan will improve efficiencies, workflows, policies, procedures, and communications relating to trees and construction conflicts. And staff and department responsibilities and workflows will be addressed as the urban forestry program is evaluated in this planning process. So here's a transition slide to provide a reminder to use the chat box that will be addressing questions and comments as we wrap up the presentation. But the next section will talk specifically about the framework of the management plan, what's required for the plan, and also the approach to achieve the scope of work. And I just thought this was a great picture to provide as a transition. It's the three sister oaks, which are estimated to be between 160 and 210 years old. And these Oregon white oaks are near the Tualatin Valley Fire Station, number 52, if folks would like to swing by and look at these trees. And I'm sure many of you on this call have seen these magnificent trees, but just a great shot. And just, I believe these are part of the Heritage Tree Program. And there's many more trees to check out on that virtual tour on the previous slides to get a sense of some of these significant trees. Okay, so we set the stage with discussing the extent of the urban forest. We looked at the benefits of trees and the collective urban forest, and also discussed key issues and opportunities as it relates to urban forestry programs, plans, and policy. And we took a look at the urban forest of today and the city's trees of tomorrow. So now what we'll like to do is describe just an overview of what the management plan is going to include. So keep in mind that this project includes 3 community meetings. This is the first of the 3. And as we start to develop the plan and identify existing conditions and baseline conditions, the second and third community meeting is going to look to gather more feedback and input and be more of an interactive discussion, and so that we can develop a meaningful plan with a shared vision. And just wanted to state these scope of work items that will be addressed in the management plan. So we have the long-term strategy framework, and this is where we're going to establish a framework for the long-term strategy, as Carrie mentioned, a 25-year planning horizon to protect, conserve, and enhance Wilsonville's urban forests with comprehensive goals and objectives. And we'll develop specific recommendations to implement those goals and objectives. We started off the project with doing that inventory in town center and along French Prairie Road to get an understanding of the urban forest status. And this is where we'll describe the status of the city's urban forests to include the history and land use changes, environmental conditions. We'll take a look at canopy cover across the city and also analyze the recent tree inventory, as well as the 24,000 plus trees in the inventory database. And so that way we can get an understanding of the structure, the species diversity, the condition, the size classes of trees, and also look at potential maintenance needs and to inform future planting as far as species, timing, location, to continue those ecosystem benefits for the long term as previously described. We'll also take a look at current and future issues, excuse me, and we'll look at the issues that will affect the city's urban forests, such as things that were mentioned earlier, like climate change, pests, and tree diversity. The management plan will also address urban forestry operations and will describe and assess the city's overall urban forestry activities and practices. And this will include various department roles and responsibilities in all aspects of urban forest management. So we're going to be conducting city staff workshops where we'll discuss specific themes of urban forestry and get a sense from multiple departments, their interactions, resource needs, efficiencies, and gaps relating to urban forestry. And then we'll be able to also review existing city documents, such as the comprehensive plan and other strategic plans that were previously mentioned. And again, that's to help align resources and for the plans to support one another in terms of implementing actions and achieving shared goals. There's other components to the framework of the management plan. As you see listed there, we have focus area goals. So we set the stage with describing the extent of the urban forest in this plan, which is to look at trees across all landscapes. But there are 2 focus areas that the plan will address, and that looks at Town Center and Charbonneau, and we'll be providing specific recommendations for these areas. So it's great to have folks on this meeting that represent these areas. We're going to be looking for additional feedback and also review of recommendations as we go forward. And this goes along with other neighborhoods throughout the city. As you see, we'll be developing additional and supporting information for these other neighborhoods as well. And there will be opportunities in future meetings to talk specific about these focus area goals. Essential to the plan, and as stated early on in this presentation with that quote from James Clark, is community engagement. So with city staff, we'll identify interested parties for community engagement and develop a strategy to obtain public input. So these community meetings are part of that strategy. There's also surveys, photo contests, which I'll describe in more detail, but that's just a quick reminder to have folks participate in providing feedback in the survey and also participating in the photo contest. And we'll look at targeting specific groups through those media, as well as through emails, focus group discussions, and on the Let's Talk Wilsonville website. I already mentioned that we have focus areas within this management plan, and we're going to be looking specifically at how to engage the Charbonneau community based on inventory data that's collected, a review of existing policies and plans, community input and feedback, and other planning elements so that we can properly engage with the public as it relates to urban forestry. And then other components of the plan are listed there. We want to make sure that we develop an effective and meaningful plan that can be adapted based on changes in the urban forest, based on changes in viewpoints and city structure and development. And we also want to provide funding mechanisms for implementing these actions in the plan. And keep in mind that this project will also consist of presentations to the Planning Commission, to City Council, and more presentations with the next 2 community meetings. All right, and then looking at how do we achieve those scope of work items and those goals for this project. So just a quick series of 8 steps to achieve those objectives. We started off with a project kickoff, and as I mentioned, we did a tree inventory and assessment of a subset of trees. We'll also be analyzing the 24,000 plus trees, along with any other tree data to help inform outreach and education, as well as recommendations in the plan. Other components of the approach for the management plan includes an internal work plan and resource alignment. And I'll be focusing discussion on number 5, which is information gathering, consisting of 6 planning elements. You can also see 3 other steps involved in the process to achieve the scope of work, and that's through a research summary and plan framework and development. And as I mentioned, the presentations and delivery. So let's get into just a little bit of the detail on the management plan itself. And I think it's really important to describe some of the process to show that there are industry standards and systematic approaches to evaluate an urban forestry program. And we want to consider all aspects and elements of a program. And we try to capture that complete and comprehensive analysis by looking at 6 different planning elements. So these planning elements are categorized as policies and plans. Again, we want to see existing plans, programs, and policies that are in place that will support and complement urban forest management. We also want to see how these actions can support ongoing existing efforts. So there's a comprehensive analysis of existing policies and plans that are conducted as part of this planning process. I also mentioned that we'll be meeting with city staff to discuss current operations and workflows. And this is really important to provide meaningful and effective actions in a plan. We can just state that something should be done in a community, but it doesn't gain any teeth or traction if we don't understand completely the existing operations and workflows. You know, how do departments interact? How do they engage? What are the roles and responsibilities? And how do we identify efficiencies and close gaps? So these operations workshops will help to address those concerns and those topics. We'll also, as I mentioned, be analyzing available data to understand existing conditions. And these existing conditions also look to analyze data from public surveys and public comments during these meetings. So not only do we get a better understanding of the urban forest itself, we want to get an understanding of existing viewpoints and perceptions as it relates to urban forestry. Another key aspect of the planning process are the urban forest benchmarks. And I'll describe the last three here on separate slides, but you can see that the last three remaining planning elements consist of the benchmarks, community engagement, and the urban forest audit system. So again, this slide is to show that we have a systematic process in place for evaluating the urban forestry program and key elements relating to urban forestry for Wilsonville. From these planning elements, we'll be able to derive and come up with goals that can be implemented in the urban forest management plan. There will be some slides to show just a general overview of the goal framework, but a plan should include the goals, the strategies, targets to measure progress and to know what you're shooting for, the actions to achieve the strategies and the goals, and then the evaluation process. So you need to know, are your actions being implemented properly? Are they being implemented in time? What actions should change because of a changing environment? And then how do you monitor progress and adjust for the next 25 years? So this goal framework will lay out those processes. All right, as I mentioned, we're just going to talk briefly about the last three planning elements, because I think these are really important to describe in a little bit more detail. So we have urban forest benchmarks, and this is a way to gauge the city's current status in terms of urban forestry. And it helps us to develop realistic goals and actions by looking at industry standards and comparable cities. So we're going to be taking a look at approximately 10 cities that are similar in size, location, or region, similar in program structure and program status. Also looking at communities that have similar authority over trees, and also looking at the resources available to communities. So as part of the planning process, we'll identify some recommended cities. We'll share that with the city and partners to provide a review and maybe suggested other cities to do this comparison. Excuse me. And so this is important, again, so that we can develop effective and realistic actions in the urban forest management plan. I also included on this slide just some general attributes that will be considered when we do this benchmarking research. So we want to look at general statistics such as city size, population density. We want to look at the demographics and the funding mechanisms and funding approach. Does it come from the general fund or special districts? Any kind of tax sourced funding. We look at the structure of these different cities and look at how Wilsonville's arranged. We also look at the amount of parks and open space for all of these communities, as well as the street tree population and the park tree population. And then there are also some other attributes that are considered in this benchmarking process, and that list isn't complete. There are a lot more attributes that we'll be analyzing going forward with this benchmarking process. Again, this is a great way to understand baseline conditions, to cross-reference with industry standards, and to come up with realistic goals in this urban forestry plan. So this is a great way to gauge where the city is at now, and as we see the city implement actions in the plan, be able to do this benchmarking again in future years and see the progression, the improvement, and differences over time. And at the bottom are just some of the example resources that we use in this process. Another key aspect or planning element as part of the urban forest management plan approach is community engagement. As I mentioned, there are 3 community meetings. This is the first of 3. And at this time, they'll be virtual. We would love to do these meetings in person for the interaction, but we try to make up for that with the chat box, as well as the public surveys, the photo contest that is open right now, as well as the website to stay up to date on Let's Talk Wilsonville. So the website includes information about these meetings, about the project, where we're at in the project, the timeline, the partners, and additional resources to consider relating to urban forestry. So those are, that's a great website to check out. It's letstalkwilsonville.com/UFMP for Urban Forest Management Plan. And that's where you can stay up to date. And there's also email listservs, and the city is sharing information through its network. But a great way to stay engaged is with that website. And throughout the process, you're going to see postcards or flyers and social media posts about this. And we encourage the community and folks to get involved and engaged. And we look forward to meeting number 2 and 3, where there'll be more feedback and input that will be open to the public to provide. And this is a key component to the Urban Forest Management Plan. As I mentioned earlier with that quote, it's a community-driven process that requires a shared vision between the city and a shared partnership between the city and the residents. Okay, so the last planning element, which is the big one, it ties all of this planning processes together by conducting a systematic analysis of key urban forestry elements. So it's technically called the Urban Forest Sustainability and Management Audit System, developed by the U.S. Forest Service. And we really like this process because it's a systematic approach that evaluates 11 categories of urban forest management and sustainability. Within those 11 categories, there are over 120 different subcategories specific to each category of urban forestry. So this is where we look at each element relating to the category and rank the city on a 0 to 3 scale, from not practiced to exceeds common practice. This evaluation process will allow us to establish baseline conditions and, again, enable adaptive management and to measure progress over time. So this gap analysis will inform the plan goals and actions. This plan won't just pull out ideas and good thoughts out of thin air. We're using this systematic approach to come up with realistic goals that'll help close those gaps and to improve the ranking in this urban forest audit system. All of these recommendations and actions in the plan will be reviewed by city staff, and as part of these community meetings, we would like to see the community weigh in on the strategies, goals, and actions that are developed. So as we get further in the process, stay tuned for opportunities to review these actions, because it's really important that we get community feedback. And it's not just a city plan, it's a shared plan for the community. And as I mentioned, this is a great way to evaluate a program 2, 5, 10 years from now to see how the plan is doing in terms of implementation progress and success, and how do you adapt and adjust actions going forward. So this is the Urban Forest Sustainability and Management Audit System. It ties those 5 other planning elements together: the existing policies and plans, the city staff workshops, the benchmarking research, the community engagement, and the existing conditions and data analyses. So we're wrapping up the management plan framework, and then we'll be opening up for open discussion, comments and questions, and addressing the chat box. This slide is just to show you an example of the detail involved in the goal framework and the actions. Just for example, you have a theme relating to community engagement. You have the action itself, the target year that it should be implemented, the lead or collaborator to implement the action. Then you have the level of effort required, the amount of resources and effort required, the priority itself, and we'll also include looking at the funding mechanism and the funding required to implement that action. What's also important with this action timetable example is that each action will have a co-benefit ranking. So we look at how this action We'll support other plan efforts by looking at does the action address human health? Does it address community well-being? Does it address equity? And does it address additional environmental components? So those are the co-benefits that are associated with each action. And that's, again, to show alignment with existing policies, plans, and programs so that these plans support one another and achieve common goals and actions. And just one more slide on the framework of the management plan, just to give some detail about the processes for developing the management plan. And I like giving these examples because it shows that we're going to be closely looking at existing policies and standard operating procedures. We'll also be looking at the Heritage Tree Program and how we can strengthen that and continue its great efforts. And also looking at what the city is doing currently in terms of tree plantings and what are the potential canopy or planting targets that the city should look at achieving to improve ecosystem benefits across the city, you know, addressing equity and providing equal levels of service across the community. So that wraps up the management plan framework. We look at providing the extent of the urban forest, providing an overview of the urban forest benefits, describing the key issues and opportunities, and then the management plan framework on how we're going to address those key issues and opportunities and enhance ecosystem benefits. And with this transition slide, again, a reminder to use the chat box. I have seen some activity on there, and I'm hoping that Carrie was able to address some of the comments and questions, and we'll be sure to open it up for continued conversation and addressing those questions. Before we get into the question and comment period, just wanted to give some closing remarks. It's important to describe the timeline of this project. As I mentioned, we had a kickoff in May, and then we did the tree inventory in July. And a lot of the research and those 6 planning elements have been conducted throughout the month of August. And we're now in September with a survey that is live until this coming Friday, and completing meeting number 1 of 3. As I mentioned, we're going to be meeting with city staff to discuss current workflows and operations, identify resource needs, and closing gaps in October. And stay tuned for more information for the next meeting, which will be most likely in November. And there will also be an additional survey, most likely around that time frame, similar to how we're doing this first community meeting. We'll be developing the draft plan in December and presenting to Planning Commission and City Council. And then we're looking to complete the project in early 2021 with additional presentations, the 3rd meeting, and then final delivery of the plan. So this plan is going to make sure that we incorporate city staff feedback, the community feedback, and all the 6 planning element results. And so we're really excited to get really digging into the project here after this first community meeting. And so I end the presentation with this reminder. As I mentioned, the community survey is currently open until this Friday, the 25th. And you can find that survey at the Let's Talk Wilsonville website. The link is there towards the bottom of the slide. And also on that website, you'll see an opportunity to upload your favorite urban forestry photo. This photo may be your favorite tree, park, vista, or view from within the city, and just really getting a sense of what folks in the city see and value in terms of urban forestry. And this helps to get a sense of community interest, and it'd also be an opportunity for you to have your picture posted and included in the urban forestry plan. So there are additional details about that program, but again, check out the Let's Talk Wilsonville website. Information about the projects on that website and these surveys. There'll be another survey coming up. There will be the other community meeting information on that website. So it's a great way to stay engaged going forward. And with that, it would be an opportunity here to address the questions and comments. Normally, in a community meeting setting, we would like to break out into focus groups or facilitate back and forth conversation. But with what we're limited to, I'm going to address the chat box. And I believe there's an option for you to unmute yourself if you would like to talk specifically to something that was presented, or any questions or comments, or perhaps I should elaborate on a specific topic. Keep in mind this presentation is being recorded, and I just need to check to make sure that there is an opportunity for you to unmute yourselves. But we will be checking the chat box now at this time.
So Chris, if you could you elaborate a little bit on, we had a question about how we might be addressing wildlife management, any issues related to that, as far as how it might affect, the urban forest?
Yeah, that's a great point. We look at addressing wildlife management, and a lot of that is done through the recommended tree species and the locations for tree plantings, and considering contiguous canopy. So identifying areas where we can make more consistent canopy across the city. In general, those are preferable for wildlife. And then when you look at recommended species, you look at biodiversity, you look at native species for wildlife and for pollinators. And a lot of that will be addressed when we look at the city code and policy, the ordinances, design standards, the tree species palette. And then when we go to analyze the urban forest on a large scale, again, looking at those areas to close the gaps and to have more contiguous canopy. We'll also be, making sure that we identify internal and external stakeholders, so that as we develop recommendations in the plan, we're considering those other partners where we have shared goals, such as improved wildlife and a healthy urban forest canopy.
And another question in regards to, this plan looks at a 25-year time frame, but certainly we're interested in looking at, the short term, the midterm, in terms of how we want to address, issues or provide recommendations. Could you just speak to that a little bit? We had a question specific to Charbonneau.
So we're looking at what short-term and long-term types of strategies, or the framework of those. Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, so it is a 25-year planning horizon, but as we evaluate the existing urban forests for those focus areas, there's going to be short-term goals, which may be in the 1-year time span, but then there'll also be incremental stages of maybe 2-year, 5-year, 10-year, and 25-year strategies and actions. Some of those like 1-year strategies will be, or actions will be, looking at communicating what we find when we do the urban forest status component of the project. So analyzing tree inventory data. A short-term goal may be providing recommended species to replant in the focus area to help increase diversity, address climate change, and provide recommended trees that are more suitable for a given site and location. Some near term that would be more in the 2 to 5 year range, may be looking at how we adjust or amend city code and policies. That process takes more time. You also want to get additional community and organization input, perhaps from the developer organizations or master builders and the folks that are involved with the design of those planned neighborhoods. So once you get more feedback and input, those 2 to 5 year implementation actions would take place for possibly changing design and ordinance related components. On a longer term, like a 10-year, it may be looking at assessing tree canopy from a top-down approach to see opportunities for setting tree canopy goals, for monitoring change in canopy. It would look at, it would look at possibly re-inventorying to see the growth of the urban forest, how diversity has changed, the size classes, getting a new baseline condition, and then long-term 25-year would really look to achieve those goals set forth in, like for the town center plan, for example, a more walkable streetscape. That's going to take time, large-scale projects to create those streetscapes, to have a diverse and healthy urban forest take time. So some of those actions would be on the longer planning horizon.
Thanks, Chris. I think that addressed the questions that we had at this point.
That's great. Thanks for fielding those. Yep. And I'm also opening the chat here to see if there are any other questions. And as I look at that, I'll just put our contact information here on the slide, and going to continue to stay on and monitor the chat here, and perhaps maybe Carrie has more to add, but if folks have to sign off, I want to make sure to say thank you to everyone for taking the time, and also keep in mind this is recorded so you can revisit the presentation, and we'll be sharing that most likely on the Let's Talk Wilsonville website, and also the PDF of this presentation will be available. And so we hope that you all will join us for the second community meeting, participate in the community survey, the photo contest, and then any other future engagement opportunities. And like I said, I'm here to address more questions and take any comments or elaborate on certain topics.
Yeah, and I would just add to what Chris said in regards to town center. We're just starting the process of a streetscape plan that the inventory that we completed as part of the town center work is really integral in terms of looking at where we can do retention of trees as they start developing a streetscape plan, and ultimately how can we preserve, a mature canopy even as that area redevelops. In addition, we just selected a consultant to start the process of updating our stormwater master plan. So the timing is really good with this project also in terms of trying to dovetail some of the work and ensure that we're doing as much as possible to preserve our urban tree canopy and take into account, the benefits it has from a stormwater management perspective. So we really have kind of a unique opportunity at this point in time with these planning efforts that are going on, and ensure that we're really integrating what we're doing with the the work that's being completed. But I'd like to thank everybody too for participating. Like Chris said, we're certainly here to field some more questions. But it's always great to have the opportunity to reach out. Certainly at this point in time, we're restricted in terms of, the face-to-face type of encounters that we can have with the public. So we want to make sure that we're providing the, the opportunities for the public still to be engaged.
Yeah, thank you for that, Carrie. Specific to the focus areas, as we start to dig into the planning elements, that's where we'll really be able to provide additional information and start to gather input from the community to start to shape those actions to achieve the goals that you described as far as tree retention and what trees are fitted for preservation as the landscape continues to change. There is also a comment in the chat box that asks whether the trees on the golf course will be replaced that were lost over the past 5 years. The person noted that 5 significant size conifers near their house had come down, and the trees weren't replaced. So, community outreach and providing information and recommendations for different landowner types is an important part of this process. And as far as the replacement of those trees on the golf course at this time, not sure what plans are in place, but it is certainly something that is considered when we do the outreach for various focus areas.
And I would just like to emphasize again, if you have, a tree, or like Chris mentioned, a scenic view that you really enjoy, we'd really like to make as much use as possible of the photos that the public provides in terms of what we put into this plan. And like I said, we'll be judging the three winners in terms of the photos that are submitted, and we'll have a nice prize for each one of those photos and those people that have submitted those. So please take the time to do that. You'll have the opportunity to submit the photos until October 30th. So you have a little bit over a month yet to participate in that process.
Yep, I believe you can do it on the Let's Talk Wilsonville website directly. And if folks are on social media, I believe on Instagram, you can hashtag a certain, maybe it's Wilsonville trees, but confirm that on the Let's Talk Wilsonville website first. But if you wanted to post directly through Instagram and then do the hashtag, we'll be able to also monitor those pictures and then choose the 3 winners from that source as well.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, I guess at this time, Carrie, do you think we should keep it open for another minute and then see about wrapping this presentation up?
Yeah, why don't we do that? We'll take a minute here to see if there are any remaining questions. If not, we'll conclude the meeting for tonight. And please stay tuned to future meeting notices, future survey notices. And we welcome your input and your participation, and we'll be spending more time in the near future talking about the steps we're taking in terms of completing the process with the plan.
Yeah, that sounds good. And want to remind folks that if you know someone or a group or organization that wasn't able to attend this meeting, to share the website, share information about this project so that folks can get engaged, and remind them that there will be additional meetings coming up, most likely in November and then later on in the year, for folks to attend and participate. Yep. So with that, I would like to thank everyone again for taking the time. Stay tuned for more information and stay up to date on the Let's Talk Wilsonville /UFMP website. And I hope everyone enjoys their evening, and we'll reconnect at the next community meeting. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night.